They call me Dr. Reyes at Brooklyn General. White coat, neatly clipped badge, calm voice. I know exactly where to place a stethoscope and how to deliver terrible news with the kind of detachment they teach you in med school. I'm the guy patients trust and parents brag about. But that's just the version of me my mother built. The one she stitched together with MCAT prep books and surgical ambition. The one she thinks she saved from the foolishness of wasting a life on paint and brushes. She has no idea. Because across the river, in a small gallery in Soho, I'm someone else. There, I'm Levi Cross, the anonymous reclusive artist whose abstract works somehow keep breaking auction records. Paintings that critics call unsettlingly human and so precise, they must have been done by a scalpel, not a brush. They're not entirely wrong. Earlier today, I stood in the newly renovated wing of the hospital my parents helped build, the same parents who've worked there for 3 decades. My mother, Dr. Jonathan Reyes, walked past a massive painting mounted in the central atrium and wrinkled her nose. $2 million for that, she muttered. Looks like someone spilled a fruit bowl. I didn't say a word. I just stood next to her, pretending to agree, while trying not to laugh. She had no idea she was criticizing her own son's work, the very painting that had anonymously funded the hospital's pediatric care expansion. A donation that came from a name she's never heard, Levi Cross. It hit me harder than I expected. Watching her in her element, so proud of her world, oblivious to mine. It made me remember where all this began, how I ended up living in 2 skins, and how neither one truly fit. I was 17 when I realized my dreams were optional, just not mine. The acceptance letter came in a cream envelope, the kind that felt expensive even before you opened it. The New York School of Contemporary Arts had not only accepted me, they'd offered a full scholarship. Full, no tuition, no rent, nothing but paint and freedom. I remember holding that letter like it might burn through my hands. My name, Elliot Reyes, printed next to the words, exceptional talent. It was the first time in my life I felt seen for who I really was. It lasted about 12 seconds. My mum, Dr. Jonathan Reyes, read the letter once, then again, and finally said, "You want to waste your life? Throw away everything we've built for you." I stood there in our living room, heart pounding, letter shaking in my hand. My dad, Lionel, didn't even pretend to consider it. "We didn't pay for SAT tutors, an AP bio just for you to paint self-portraits and call it success," he snapped. "Grow up." I wanted to tell them about the national competitions I'd secretly won. About the small online art account I ran under a fake name. About the gallery owner, Melanie Cooper, who had seen my work and said it was alive. Instead, I just stood there, because I knew the script already. "You're a Reyes," my mum said. "We save lives, Elliot. We don't chase delusions." Delusions. That word clung to me harder than the label on my white coat. So I made a deal with the devil, or at least with 2 of them wearing pressed scrubs. I declined the scholarship. I accepted my place at Columbia Med. I folded myself into their version of the future. But I didn't burn the other path entirely. That night, I sent Melanie an email. Subject line, portfolio submission, Levi Cross 1, told her I'd continue painting on one condition. No interviews, no photos, no identity ever revealed. Total anonymity. She replied an hour later, "Mystery sells. Let's make magic." And just like that, Levi Cross was born. People talk about burnout in medical school like it's a badge of honor. Sleep 4 hours a night, drink coffee like water, cry in anatomy labs and call it resilience. They wear their exhaustion like armor. Me? I wore mine like a disguise. By day, I was Elliot Reyes, top of my class, reliable, deadpan, the kind of resident who never showed up late, never pushed back, never let anything slip. I wasn't the smartest, but I was sharp, surgical with my precision. I knew how to memorize and regurgitate and appear composed, even when everything inside me was screaming. By night, I became Levi Cross. In a windowless studio above a defunct bookstore in Crown Heights, I painted like I was trying to dig something out of my ribs. My hands, used to sutures and scalpels, shifted effortlessly to brushes and palette knives. I didn't paint pretty things. I painted rage, desperation, isolation. Sometimes I painted anatomy, but wrong. Misplaced hearts, twisted veins, organs cracked open and spilling colour. The chaos made me feel human again. The studio had no heating, and sometimes I'd wake up there after collapsing post-shift, still in scrubs, paint smudged across my face like war paint. On good nights, I'd finish a piece and shoot it off to Melanie, who somehow knew exactly how to market pain. She was a master of silence, never once asked for my real name, never slipped up. She sold my paintings under the legend of Levi Cross, the anonymous surgeon turned artist no one could quite place. By the end of med school, Levi was a problem. Not because it wasn't working. Because it was, really, really well. A year before I graduated, one of my paintings, a triptych I called Refracted Silence, sold for $180. Oh. I found out via text from Melanie while I was elbow deep in a cadaver's thoracic cavity. Melanie, triptych sold. Buyer anonymous. Full price. Congrats, genius. I almost dropped the scalpel. The hardest part wasn't hiding the money. I created a separate LLC under my alias and funneled the earnings through a lawyer who owed Melanie some enormous favour. My parents never suspected. They just thought I was really responsible with my modest resident salary. No, the hardest part was the loneliness. No one knew. Not my fellow residents. Not my two closest friends from undergrad. Not even Kayla, who had pulled me out of more panic attacks during cardiology rounds than I could count. Everyone knew me as one thing, and Levi as something else entirely. Sometimes I'd read reviews online. Levi Cross sees people like an MRI machine fused with a soul. How can someone so anonymous understand human emotions so intimately? I'd laugh. They didn't know that I lived human emotion 6 nights a week, standing next to sobbing parents, pronouncing time of death, holding pressure on bullet wounds, explaining terminal diagnoses to people barely old enough to vote. I wasn't just painting grief. I absorbed it, converted it, poured it onto canvas so I didn't lose my damn mind. But juggling both lives came at a cost. There were nights when I'd finish a 36-hour shift and go straight to the studio instead of sleeping. I'd paint until my knees buckled. Once, I passed out on the subway with wet paint on my hands. A woman thought I was bleeding and called EMS. By the time I started residency at Brooklyn General, the hospital my parents practically ran, I had already cleared over $5 million in sales. I bought a penthouse in Dumbo and never moved into it, rented it under Levi's name instead. I still lived in a cramped apartment near the hospital, slept 3 hours a night, and drank off brand energy drinks that tasted like battery acid. The only person who knew anything was Melanie. And even she didn't know I was Elliot Reyes' medical legacy and obedient golden boy. She just called me Doc in emails. Then came the moment I knew things were going to spiral. The hospital launched a new initiative, Healing Through Art, a wellness program designed to humanize the sterile hallways, inspired by similar movements in Europe. The board set aside a massive budget and reached out to several high-profile artists. One of them was Levi Cross. Melanie didn't hesitate. She sold them a centerpiece piece called Vessel Without Map, a 6-foot canvas of bleeding anatomical structures dissolving into chaos and bloom. One of my most intense works. I'd created it after a 48-hour ICU shift, where we lost a 9-year-old boy with a ruptured AVM. The hospital paid $2 million, and no one knew the artist was their resident. I attended the installation ceremony with my parents, still in my coat, pretending I had just come off rounds. My mum stared at the piece like it was an alien. "I don't understand this kind of art," she muttered. "It's like pain but messy. It's beautiful," Dr. Ava Morgan, the chief of medicine, whispered beside her. "There's something almost clinical about it, don't you think?" Clinical. I bit the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted blood. That night, I couldn't paint. I sat in the studio and stared at a blank canvas, my mind spinning. How long could I keep doing this? How many lives could I live before they all collapsed? Because the truth was, I was good at medicine. Not because of them, but because I understood people. I noticed patterns others didn't. My colleagues chalked it up to instinct. It wasn't. It was colour theory, negative space, harmony. I saw symptoms like brushstrokes, and that made me dangerous. I didn't know it yet, but people were beginning to notice. A nurse in ICU asked me once, "Hey, isn't it weird how you're always off during Levi Cross exhibits? My girlfriend's obsessed with his work." I laughed it off, but my pulse spiked. I kept telling myself I was in control, that I could stay hidden, that no one would put the pieces together. But just like any good painting, the truth was always there, layered beneath the surface, waiting for someone to look just a little closer. Secrets have weight. They settle in your spine. They shift when you're tired. They get heavier the longer you carry them. 6 years. That's how long I lived with mine. By the time Levi Cross had a full retrospective being planned at the Met, I was in the final year of residency, sleep-deprived and emotionally numb. I'd stopped thinking in hours and started thinking in rotations. I lived between 2 universes, one fluorescent and clinical, the other oil-stained and full of meaning. And the walls between them were thinning. The first real crack came from Melanie. "Melanie, the Met wants to do something special. First ever public unveiling. They're begging me to convince you to show up," I laughed. "And risk everything? Pass." But the truth? I thought about it. I'd been hiding for so long that the idea of finally stepping into a space that wasn't someone else's version of my life felt like oxygen. Still, I said no. That was before the New York Times reached out, not to Levi Cross, to Brooklyn General. Apparently, a staff member had contacted a reporter anonymously, hinting that a resident at the hospital might be the reclusive artist whose anatomical precision had baffled critics. At first, I thought it was a joke, until I got a call from Melanie. "You need to listen very carefully," she said. "They're publishing tonight. Someone connected the dots. They know Levi's work is tied to medical knowledge, and they think it's you." I couldn't breathe. "You said no one knew," I whispered. "I didn't tell anyone, Elliot. But someone at the hospital noticed the scheduling patterns. Every major gallery event, you were conveniently off shift. The timeline fits." I slumped into a chair in one of the consultation rooms, my heart pounding. I was seconds away from being exposed. My entire world, everything I'd built on precision and secrecy, was about to unravel. My colleagues, my patients, my parents, all of them were about to learn that I had been living a lie. A beautiful, profitable, soul-saving lie, but a lie nonetheless. And I had 1 hour to decide whether I was going to confirm it or let someone else tell my story for me. Melanie's voice pulled me back. They're giving us a window to comment before they publish. If you want to come forward on your terms, this is your shot. I stared out the narrow window into the hallway, watching my parents do rounds together, side by side, like they had for 3 decades. My mother's stride calm, deliberate. My dad's posture erect and imposing. They looked invincible. I felt like a ghost. "I'll call you back," I said, and hung up. As if the universe was doubling down, my pager buzzed a second later. Peds ward, emergency. I shoved my phone in my pocket and ran. A child, 7 years old. Severe allergic reaction. Panicked mother. Collapsing airway. Adrenaline took over. I moved fast, clear, focused. 1 shot of epinephrine. Breathing stabilized. Crisis averted. Afterward, as I stood next to his mother, her hand clutching mine, she whispered, "You made him feel safe. Thank you." And I looked at the walls, stark, sterile, lifeless. Nothing like the piece I'd sold, now hanging in the hospital lobby. The same one my mum had rolled her eyes at. And for the first time in 6 years, I didn't feel shame about the double life. I felt proud because both of them mattered, and suddenly I didn't want to hide anymore. By the time I called Melanie back, I had made my choice. "Don't fight the story," I said. "Let it break. But we're going to give them something better. Tell the Met I'm coming tonight." Silence. Then, "You're sure?" "I've been sure for a while. Just scared." We had hours. I requested an emergency schedule change, my first in years. Ava Morgan raised an eyebrow but nodded. "You've earned it, Rise." I went home and opened the closet that housed all the parts of me my parents never knew existed. Buried beneath old canvases and Levi Cross's archive was a suit I had designed myself. Black, hand-brushed with streaks of gold, acrylic bold, unapologetic and strange. Like me, I changed, clipped my hospital badge to my bag, and texted my parents. "Me, I need you both to come to the Metropolitan Museum of Art tonight. It's important. Dad, we have a donor dinner. Can't it wait?" Me, "No, Mom. What time?" At 7:45 p.m, the Met was packed. Press everywhere. Velvet ropes. Buzzing speculation about whether Levi Cross would finally make an appearance. Backstage, Melanie adjusted my lapel and said, "They're going to lose their minds." I scanned the crowd, then I saw them. My parents, standing near the exhibit entrance, dressed like they were headed to another hospital gala, stiff, confused, already annoyed. They hadn't seen me yet. Behind them, draped in velvet, stood the piece I had created in the worst week of my career, 5 pediatric deaths in 3 days. I had painted it at 4 a.m. shifts, between crying in elevators and pretending to be okay. It was called Inheritance, a white-coated figure in the center. Their shadow was an artist's paint smeared, bent over an easel. The background, a swirl of all lights and brushstrokes, anatomy charts tangled in roots and veins. And at the bottom, etched in gold leaf, "We are the sum of what we hide and what we share." The director tapped the mic. "Ladies and gentlemen, after years of anonymity, the artist known as Levi Cross is here." Camera shutters erupted. I stepped forward. "Mum, Dad," I said quietly, arriving just as the curtain dropped. They turned. My father's eyes went wide. My mother's mouth opened, then closed. "I'm Levi Cross," I said. Silence. Around us the room erupted. You'd think the world ends with a bang. For me, it started with a whisper. "I'm Levi Cross." My mother blinked as if she misheard. My father's jaw tightened. I had seen that look my whole life, surgical precision meeting disbelief. He wasn't processing. He was diagnosing. Behind them, the crowd was exploding. Flashbulbs, gasps, shouted questions. Around us, whispers turned into a roar, but I didn't flinch. I stood there in my paint-streaked black suit, hospital badge clipped to my bag like a ghost from a life I was still partly living. "You're a doctor," my mother said, her voice almost breaking. "I'm both," I replied. "I've always been both." Before they could say more, Dr. Ava Morgan appeared, flushed with shock and excitement. "That piece in the hospital lobby that was you? You painted it?" I nodded. She turned to the press nearby. Brooklyn General received a $2 million donation from this artist last month. It funded our pediatric expansion. My father cut in. "Donation? What donation?" Dr. Morgan hesitated. "The money from the painting. It came back as an anonymous contribution. For the children's program, we assumed a philanthropist had made the gift." My father's gaze snapped to me. "You gave your money to the hospital?" "Our hospital?" The tension in his voice was palpable, caught between disbelief, pride, and something more complicated. I nodded again. It felt right. Before the next question could land, Melanie stepped in, her gallery badge swinging. "Elliot, sorry, Levi's work has sold over $40 million to date. That hospital piece was actually one of his smaller contributions." A ripple passed through the room like an aftershock. My mother looked pale, my father stunned, and then, from somewhere behind us, someone shouted, "That explains the anatomy." A prominent art critic emerged, practically glowing. "I always said there was something uniquely clinical in Cross's brushwork. It wasn't just intuition, it was knowledge. Medical knowledge. I bring an artist's heart to my medicine," I replied quietly. "And a doctor's clarity to my art." A hush fell again, and in that strange, suspended moment, something shifted. Kayla Thompson, my colleague, fellow resident, pushed through the press. "Elliot," she said, eyes shining, "remember the Williams case? The one no one could figure out? You saw something in his symptoms the rest of us missed." I nodded, heart pounding. She turned to the press. "He didn't just diagnose it. He saw it. Like colours on a canvas, he mapped patterns no one else recognized. That's why he's so damn good." My mother's hand gripped her bag tightly, eyes flicking between me and the painting behind us. My father said nothing, his gaze now locked on the canvas, titled Inheritance, the one he had unknowingly walked past at least 10 times on the hospital's digital rotation display. He stepped forward slowly, eyes scanning the strokes, the balance, the emotion carved into every inch. "The anatomy," he said softly, fingers twitching unconsciously like he was holding surgical forceps. "Every detail. It's exact. Muscles, bone contours, perfect." "I learned from the best," I said, standing beside him. He turned, finally facing me fully, and to my utter surprise, his eyes were glassy. My father, the man who once mocked a scholarship to art school, was speechless. My mother joined us, placing a tentative hand on my shoulder. "The painting in the hospital, the placement wasn't random, was it?" I shook my head. "You and Dad stop by the atrium every morning. I wanted you to walk by something beautiful, something from me. Even if you never knew it," her voice cracked. "We didn't. We had no idea. I didn't want to disappoint you," I said. "But I couldn't kill this part of me to fit inside a coat I never chose." That was when Melanie whispered something in my ear. "The Met buyers are waiting. Biddings already past $3.5 million. I turned to my parents, voice calm. "I was going to sell it. Until tonight." My father looked at the painting one last time, then at the crowd. "This belongs in the hospital," he said clearly, "next to the one in the atrium, where everyone can see what happens when you don't force someone to choose between two halves of themselves." He turned to me and, for the first time in my adult life, smiled not the proud, rehearsed smile of a parent who thinks you've checked the right boxes. A real smile, something soft, human, vulnerable. "So is my son," he said. The fallout was immediate. The story hit every major news outlet, doctor by day, millionaire artist by night. Art world blogs broke down my colour theory. Medical journals speculated about diagnostic perception enhanced by artistic cognition. The gallery blew up. Collectors doubled their offers. I had meetings booked out 6 months in advance, half of them, with institutions who previously rejected me. But the best part? Brooklyn General launched a new initiative, Integrated Art in Medicine, with me as director. I lead art therapy sessions. I curate rotating exhibits of patient and staff work. I give lectures on perception and healing. My paintings now hang in clinics, children's wards, and ICU waiting rooms. Not because they're valuable, but because they mean something. My parents? They're adjusting. Sometimes they look at me like they're still meeting a stranger. Other times, I catch them lingering in front of Inheritance, or flipping through online reviews of Levi Cross like proud but confused tourists. 2 weeks ago, I found my father standing alone in the atrium, looking up at my first piece. "I was wrong," he said without turning around. "When I told you art couldn't be a future. I thought I was protecting you, but I almost destroyed what made you extraordinary." I stood beside him in silence. Both of us in white coats, both of us older than we were the day that first letter arrived. "You didn't destroy anything," I said. "You taught me structure, precision, and how to pay attention to what isn't obvious. I just applied it to a bigger canvas than you expected." He chuckled, an unguarded, honest sound. "Your mother's thinking of taking painting classes," he said. "She wants to understand your world better." I smiled. "It was always the same world," I said. "I just needed you to see it." Now, when people ask me what I am, a doctor or an artist, I don't flinch. I tell them the truth. I'm someone who refuses to be divided. My art heals in colour. My medicine heals in care. But both come from the same place, a desire to make the world just a little more whole. And on the plaque, under the painting in the hospital lobby, you'll find 2 names, Dr. Elliot Reyes and Levi Cross. Because for the first time, I don't have to choose. Story 2. The summer I turned 24, my family decided it'd be funny to leave me at a rest stop in another state. Their words, "Let's see if he can make it back." Their laughter, their engine fading down the road. I never went after them. 15 years passed. Then they found me. Back then, I was living in a small town in Utah, working for my stepdad, Carl, at his hardware store. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid enough to keep gas in my car and instant ramen in the cabinet. College was a waste of money, according to Carl, and not for people like us. He said that last part a lot, not for people like us. My younger half-brother, Mason, was the golden boy. Star athlete, future business tycoon, Carl's pride and joy. I was the spare tire in the back seat of the family photo. My mum, Joy, floated somewhere in between, quiet, passive, sometimes trying to intervene, but never loud enough to make it matter. When Carl announced we were driving out to Nebraska for my cousin's wedding, I should have seen it coming. A 14-hour car ride with Carl and Mason treating me like the family jester. I should have faked the flu or gotten sick with a bad brake caliper, but I didn't. We were 3 days into the road trip when it happened. Somewhere in eastern Colorado, wide open, nothing, wind, wheat, and a beat-up rest stop off I-76. I'd been passed out in the back of the SUV with my headphones on, trying to drown out Mason's TikTok laughter and Carl's rant about gas prices. I didn't even take my phone into the building. It was plugged in, charging in the back seat. 10 minutes, That's all it took. Bathroom, stretch my legs, splash some cold water on my face. I stepped outside and the parking space was empty. At first, I honestly thought they were just messing with me. Maybe moved the car to the other side of the building. I circled the lot. Twice. Then the truth started to bloom like frostbite. They were gone. I sat on the curb for over an hour, told myself they'd come back, that Mason would pop out of the back window filming my reaction, laughing like a jackass, that Carl would grunt something about not being able to take a joke, but nobody came. A trucker asked if I was okay. I told him I was waiting for my girlfriend, just taking her a while. He nodded and walked away. By hour 2, the pit in my stomach had gone from cold to solid. I could hear Mason's voice in my head. I bet he's crying like a baby right now. Carl's smug chuckle. Let's see if the loser can survive without us. Joy? Probably putting on lipstick in the visor mirror, pretending none of this was happening. That's when I stopped waiting. I asked a woman with 2 kids if I could borrow her phone. She hesitated but handed it over. I didn't call my family. I called information and got the number for a shelter in Stirling. The shelter was loud and smelled like industrial soap and regret. But the guy at the desk, Ken, let me use a public computer and pointed me toward resources. I found the address of the wedding from the invite I'd glanced at before we left, but then I paused. Why would I go there? What kind of idiot tries to return to people who literally left them on the side of the road for fun? That night, I slept in a cot under a flickering ceiling light. I had no wallet, no ID, no backup plan. But for the first time in a long time, I also had no expectations to meet. 2 days later, I had a job washing dishes at a local diner. It was called June's, run by a cranky but kind-hearted woman named Cora, who had more tattoos than clean dish rags. I told her I'd lost everything and needed a break. She shrugged. You got 2 hands? Use M. Steal anything, and I'll bury you under the dumpster. Sound fair? Sounded like a start. Ken at the shelter helped me request a new birth certificate. I used my first paycheck to buy a burner phone and a week's worth of thrift store jeans. My fingertips were constantly pruned from the sink, but I felt more grounded than I ever did back home. 7 days after the joke, my phone rang. It was an unknown number, I answered. My mum's voice. Cracked, panicked. Eli? Oh my God. Where are you? Are you okay? They'd come back, she said. Waited for 20 minutes. Thought I was just being stubborn. It was supposed to be funny. Behind her, I heard Carl. Tell him to stop being dramatic. He needs to get to the wedding. And Mason's laugh. Bro, are you actually mad? It was just a prank. I let the silence stretch. Then I said calmly, you wanted to see if I could make it on my own. So watch. Click. I blocked the number. Then I blocked every number I knew by heart. Changed my phone number the next day. 27 missed calls before I wiped it all clean. A month later, I had a tiny studio above a dry cleaner. It reeked of detergent and heat, but it was mine. I worked the morning shift at June's and closed up some nights too. I started learning how to prep ingredients, then line cook. Cora taught me how to hold a knife without losing a thumb and how to tell when a steak was done just by touch. She swore at me more than anyone ever had, but I'd take that over Carl's passive-aggressive digs any day. Sometimes I'd check my old email. Dozens of messages. From Joy, please come home. I miss you. From Carl, enough with the tantrum. Be a man. From Mason, grow up. It's not that deep. I never responded. I never would. Here's the thing, when you get your first taste of freedom, real freedom, not you, can stay up late, but you can wake up in peace. You don't go back to the cage. Some nights were brutal. Watching other people's lives on Instagram birthday dinners, beach vacations, siblings who got matching tattoos and wondering what it would feel like to be wanted, not tolerated, not mocked. But even on the loneliest nights, I could still breathe. And that was enough. 3 months after they ditched me, I got one last email from my mum. "Your grandpa keeps asking about you. Just tell us you're alive." I deleted the account. That night, Cora taught me how to bake her cherry crumble. She said I had good hands for crust. It was the first compliment I remembered in years. 5 years passed. I didn't talk to them, didn't look back, didn't need to. I wasn't that stranded kid anymore, staring at an empty parking space. I had a routine, a rhythm. I worked mornings at June's, studied business admin at the community college 2 nights a week, lived in a 1-bedroom with a leaky sink and paper-thin walls, but no one yelled at me there. The person I used to be, that guy was gone, and in his place, someone learning how to want things, not just survive them. Cora gave me a shot at running the kitchen one Saturday when she threw out her back, lifting a crate of potatoes she definitely didn't need help with. I kept the place running. She grumbled the next day, but handed me the keys to open up if she overslept. That was her version of trust. Around that time, I met Nora. She was a med student, always came in twice a week, with her nose buried in a stack of flashcards. Ordered the same thing every time: spinach omelette, no onions, and enough black coffee to kill a lesser person. She never looked up. Not until I messed with the name on my apron. "The first time," it said Eddie. She squinted. "You know your tag's wrong, right?" I grinned. "Only if you believe everything you read." She rolled her eyes. Next time, I wrote Benny, then Craig, then your favourite. That got a laugh. 6 weeks of sarcastic banter turned into a late-night walk after my shift. That walk turned into a cheap diner dinner, which turned into early mornings brushing our teeth in the same sink. A year later, she moved in. Nora didn't ask about my family at first. She just accepted that I had history. But one night, when I came home after a long shift and found her holding a letter, one from my mum that somehow slipped through the forwarding filter I broke, told her everything. The joke they pulled, the months afterward, the cold silence I'd wrapped around my old life like a safety blanket. She listened, didn't interrupt, didn't try to fix it. She just said, "That was cruel." And I believed her. I didn't hate my family. That's the thing. I didn't sit around plotting revenge. There were no dramatic fantasies, no confrontation scripts in the mirror. I just detached, like a leaf finally giving up on a rotten branch. I wanted them to disappear from my story. Instead, they kept showing up, just not in person. One afternoon, I checked Facebook through a dummy account. Yeah, I had one. Mason's name popped up in a news article. DUI. Smashed his car into a street lamp. The mugshot didn't look anything like the golden boy I remembered. Puffy, hollow-eyed, but still him. Carl's hardware store, shuttered. Couldn't compete with the new Home Depot down the road. Joy? Posting throwback photos with captions like, "My boys, my world." She always tagged Mason. Never mentioned me. It didn't hurt. Not anymore. Just felt like watching strangers play dress up with old memories. 3 years into my new life, Cora pulled me aside during a slow breakfast shift. "You ever thought about managing a second location?" she asked, flipping a dish rag over her shoulder. "What second location?" "The one I'm thinking of opening." "Across town." I blinked. Thought she was joking. "Why me?" She shrugged. "You show up. You give a damn. You don't drop plates. It's not that deep." I didn't sleep that night. Old voices came creeping in: Carl's laugh, Mason's digs, that inner whisper that said, You're not enough. But Nora looked at me the next morning, bedhead and all, and said, "You'd be a dumbass not to try." So I tried. 6 months later, June's East opened. It was smaller, funkier. The menu was half mine. We served breakfast burritos, fancy toast, and Cora's pie recipes with my weird experimental twists. I worked 12-hour days, sometimes more. Nora hated it. Not me, but the hours, the missed dinners, the exhaustion. She started leaving sticky notes on the fridge. "You were asleep before I got home. Again. I miss your face. We fought. Then made up. Then fought again." But she never stopped supporting me. And when I made my first big payment on her student loans, just a dent, but still something, she cried. Not performative tears. Ugly ones. Snot. Hiccups. The whole deal. "I never thought anyone would show up for me like this," she whispered. "Neither did I." The year after that, my grandfather died, the only person in that whole family who ever quietly rooted for me. He used to sneak me snacks during holidays and slip me cash in birthday cards labelled, "Don't tell your dad." Joy posted a dramatic tribute on social media. "Rip, Dad. Tell Eli we still love him." I almost laughed. Almost. I didn't go to the funeral. Thought about it. Googled flights. Nora offered to come. Cora said I didn't owe anyone closure. I listened. Instead, I sent a generic bouquet with a card that read, "E, no return address." A week later, I got a Facebook friend request from a name I didn't recognize. But the message read, "Eli, it's Uncle Troy. Your mum gave me your email, but it bounced. Just wanted to check if you're okay. Your dad's been asking around. Blocked. Immediately." Then I sat on the bathroom floor and had my first panic attack in 2 years. Nora found me like that, sweaty, shaking knees to chest. She didn't ask what happened. She just sat with me, shoulder against mine. "They can't take anything you don't give," she said softly. Next day, I called a lawyer, asked about restraining orders, updated all my privacy settings, told the front of house staff at both June's locations, "If anyone asks about me, say you don't know who that is, just in case." 5 years to the day since they left me behind, I married Nora. We kept it simple. Backyard ceremony. Her sister made the playlist. Cora brought pies and gave a shaky toast about how I used to burn grilled cheese and now I ran a restaurant. We laughed. We cried. Nora's dad pulled me into a bear hug I didn't flinch from. Her whole family adopted me that day. No conditions, no tests, just love. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged. 1 week after the wedding, I checked my dummy account. Carl had posted in a community group, looking for my son. Last known location, Grand Junction, company family emergency. There was no emergency. Unless foreclosure, medical debt, and Mason's third DUI counted. They weren't looking for me because they missed me. They were looking because they needed something. I stared at the screen for a long time, then closed the laptop. Didn't feel angry, didn't feel sad. Just done. I climbed into bed next to Nora, wrapped my arm around her and decided, they're not my story anymore. 15 years. That's how long it had been since I was left at that rest stop, standing in the Colorado sun without a wallet, a phone, or a family. 15 years, and I hadn't heard a word from them until they showed up. It started with a LinkedIn notification. Someone viewed my profile. 27 times. Same name, Mason Clark. I stared at the screen, heart thudding. It had been so long since I even thought about that version of me, the one who flinched when someone raised their voice, the one who walked on eggshells in his own house. I closed the tab. Told myself it was nothing, but 3 days later I got a call at June's East. "Eli, you've got some folks here asking for you. Say they're family." I froze. For a second, I thought it was a mistake. It wasn't. I walked out to the front of the diner, and time folded in on itself. Carl stood there older now, greyer, but still carrying that same heavy presence. His eyes scanned the place like he was sizing it up, calculating. Joy clutched her purse in both hands. Her hair was dyed too dark for her age, her eyes smaller than I remembered. And Mason, same smirk. Same stance, only softer now, bloated in the way people get when they've run out of second chances. There was a younger woman with them, maybe early 20s. She hovered in the background, didn't say a word. Later, I found out her name was Harper Mason's second wife. I didn't invite them in, just pointed to a table in the corner and told Maya, our server, to bring water. Then I sat down and waited. They talked over each other at first. Carl said they'd seen a magazine feature about local business success stories. There was a photo of me, standing in front of June's East with my staff. One of Joy's friends had sent it to her. Joy said she cried when she saw it. Said she always knew I'd turn out okay. Mason laughed too hard, made jokes that didn't land. Harper said nothing. They didn't mention the rest stop. Not once. Just danced around it, like it was a minor bump on the road and not the moment they lost me forever. Then came the why. Carl had heart problems, no insurance. Joy needed knee surgery. They were drowning in debt. Mason's latest startup had collapsed crypto something, no details. Their house had been foreclosed on. They were living in an apartment above a liquor store. They weren't there to reconnect. They were there because they thought I had something to give. Money. I didn't explode, didn't cry, didn't say the things I'd rehearsed in 1,000 imaginary arguments. I just listened. And when they finished, I asked the only question I cared about, why now? Carl leaned in, like we were striking a deal. Because you're doing well. You have a life. And family helps family. Joy nodded. We're still your family, Eli, Mason added. Don't let pride get in the way. That's when I laughed. Not mean. Not loud. Just quiet and bitter, like a door closing. I got up, walked to the back and returned with an envelope. Inside was a check for $76.50. Carl looked confused. What's this? I said, in 2010, that's what a Greyhound ticket cost to get from Stirling back to our town. That's what it would have taken for me to come home after you left me. He went quiet. Then his face turned red. You still holding on to that? After all these years? You left me, I said, calm as the weather, for a laugh. And now you're here because you think I owe you something. Mason stood up, like he was gearing up for a show of strength. But I wasn't that kid anymore. You don't scare me, I said. Joy started crying. Asked how I could be so cold. You didn't cry when you drove away, I told her. I walked them to the door, told them they weren't welcome back. Carl muttered something under his breath and dropped the check on the ground like it was dirt. Harper, still silent, gave me the smallest nod before she turned away. They left. I locked the door behind them. That night I told Nora everything. She held my hand while we watched our kids, Jude and Maya, sleep. Little bodies tangled in blankets and stuffed animals. They don't get to take anything from you, she whispered. And they didn't. My life didn't fall apart after that. If anything, it got clearer. I hired another manager for June's East and started mentoring other young cooks. Nora opened a small clinic. She only worked 3 days a week, so she could be home with the kids. We bought a modest house with a backyard full of patchy grass and a hammock that nobody used enough. Jude planted carrots in the spring. Maya picked them too early every time and called them baby carrots. And I smiled, because even if the carrots were tiny, they were ours. Sometimes the past knocks. A message, a tag, an email from a cousin who didn't know what really happened. I never respond. Not out of anger anymore. But because that door is closed, you leave someone on the side of the road like they're disposable and you don't get to come back when your luck runs dry. I didn't build a life out of revenge. I built it out of peace, out of quiet mornings and real love and bedtime stories that don't end with shame. The funny thing is, they thought leaving me would break me, but sometimes the fire doesn't burn you, it forges you. So no, I never made it back home. I made something better. I made my own. Story 3, I didn't find out my marriage was broken from an affair, or a secret second phone, or even some sketchy bank transaction. No, the moment I realized the woman I married didn't respect me, didn't even like me, was when I saw her high-five her brother through the frosted glass of our living room window, while I stood locked outside in a blizzard. My name's Colin. I'm 34. Until recently, I was married to Kira, 32 for 5 years. The first couple of years, decent. Nothing extraordinary, but we had a rhythm. Quiet evenings, lazy Sundays, occasional arguments, normal couple stuff. Things started slipping about a year and a half ago, when her parents moved in just for a couple weeks after their lease ended. That couple weeks turned into months, and eventually, Kira's younger brother Lucas, 28, moved in too after his roommate situation fell apart. So now, our 3-bedroom house became a 5-adult circus. But somehow, I was always the one left out of the group chat. Her mum was always rearranging things, like our kitchen, without even asking. Her dad made casual digs about how much I made. And Lucas? He acted like I was a tenant in his place. I brought it up with Kira multiple times. She cried every time. Told me I didn't understand how much her family meant to her. Said I didn't make an effort with them. Eventually, I just stopped bringing it up. I started taking more shifts, spending more time at the garage or anywhere that wasn't home. Looking back, yeah, I was slowly giving up, but I still held on to some hope. Until last Thursday, we got hit with one of the worst snowstorms in years. The kind you see on the news with reporters shouting over the wind. I picked up an extra shift that night, partly for the money, mostly to avoid the weekly game night that her family turned into a loud, exclusionary roast fest. My shift ended around 11 p.m. and the roads were a mess. What should have been a 20-minute drive took almost an hour. By the time I pulled into our driveway, my bones ached and my eyes were dry from the heat blasting in the car. All the lights were still on, which was weird. Midnight wasn't exactly prime time in our house, but okay, maybe they lost track of time. I pushed through snow that came up to my knees, fumbled with my keys, and nothing. The lock wouldn't budge. I checked again. Right house, right key. I knocked, waited, knocked again. Finally, I saw movement through the frosted window. Porch light flipped on. And there she was, Kira, my wife, looking at me through the glass, not worried, not relieved, amused. I mouthed, "Open the door." She shook her head. I called her. She picked up. Didn't say anything at first. "The door's locked," I said, breath visible in the cold. "My key's not working. Can you let me in?" "Yeah." "About that," she said, so casual, like we were discussing dinner plans. "We changed the locks today." "You what? Why would you do that without telling me?" "Lucas thought it'd be funny," she replied, still with that little amused edge to her voice. It wasn't a joke. No punchline followed. I stood there soaked, freezing, confused. Then Lucas showed up beside her, beer in hand, smug grin on his face. "No losers tonight, bro. Family meeting. Members only." I looked at Kira, waiting for her to say anything remotely human. But she laughed. Not nervously, not regretfully. She laughed. Her dad gave a mocking toast behind them. Her mom giggled like a teenager. "Kira," I said, my voice shaking, This isn't funny. Open the door. Maybe crash with a friend, she shrugged. We're having a serious discussion about the house. I was stunned. I am part of this house. I'm your husband. Lucas leaned into the glass. Freeze to death, worthless idiot. And then she high-fived him. Something in me snapped. Or maybe something that had been bending for a long time finally broke. I didn't yell, didn't bang on the door. I just turned, walked through the snow back to my car, and left. The blizzard was still raging, and my phone battery hit 2%. Gas tank running low. I drove blindly until I found a tiny, all-night diner that somehow still had power. I sat in a booth drinking black coffee until sunrise. Alone, cold, completely numb. That night didn't just end my marriage. It ended the version of me that tolerated everything. I spent that whole night at the diner. The kind of place that hasn't changed in 20 years. Faded booths, a humming fridge, waitress who looks like she's seen every kind of heartbreak walk through the door. Her name was Jo. She didn't ask questions, just kept the coffee coming. My phone died sometime after 1 a.m., not that I wanted to hear anything from them anyway. That silence? It was the first peace I'd had in months. At sunrise, I borrowed the diner's landline and called the only person I knew I could trust, my friend Mason. We'd been tight since college, but lately I hadn't seen him much. Kira's family didn't like him, thought he was too opinionated. Translation, he saw through their BS. When I told him what happened, Mason didn't hesitate. Come over, couch is yours, I'll cook breakfast. That's a real friend. Over the next few days, I laid low, got a prepaid phone with a new number, and kept the old one turned off. I didn't post online, didn't check socials. I needed time to breathe. Think, figure out what came next. But before I could do anything, I needed to know what I was dealing with. First stop was the bank. Our joint account used to be where we paid the bills, groceries, savings. Last time I checked, it had around $8,000. When I logged in, $372 left. She'd been draining it for months. I pulled the transaction history. Kira had been moving money bit by bit to some account I didn't recognize. Regular withdrawals that looked like grocery runs or family expenses, spread out just enough to not trip any alerts. About $7,800 gone. Second stop, the bank branch. I needed to make sure all our important documents, birth certs, car title, house deed copies, were still in the safe deposit box I opened years ago. Thank God I'd put them there before her family moved in. They hadn't touched them. Back at Mason's, I sat at his kitchen table with a cup of tea and a legal pad. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm not stupid either. I started writing everything out. Timeline, money movements, names, screenshots, every detail. By Sunday night, I turned my old phone back on to see what the damage was. 47 messages, texts, voicemails, DMs. The first ones were aggressive. Kira calling me immature, her mum saying I was being ridiculous. Lucas, of course, chiming in with just messing around, bro. Then came the worry. Where are you? Just let us know you're safe. Then the panic. They'd called my work, checked with my friends, filed a missing person report. Part of me wanted to laugh. They locked me out in the middle of a snowstorm and now they're playing search party. I let them stew for a bit. Then I sent one message. Meet me at Starbucks. Tomorrow, noon. Come alone. She didn't. She showed up with the whole crew. Her parents. Lucas. The same entourage that kicked me out of my own home like I was the family dog that peed on the rug. I almost walked out. But something in me said, no, you need to see this through. So I sat down, looked Kira dead in the eye. We agreed. Alone. She started crying. Her mum started talking. Lucas looked bored. Her dad tried to act like he was in charge. I stayed calm, asked one question. "Where's the money, Kira?" Her face turned ghost white. At first, she tried dodging. Said something about helping family in hard times. Her dad jumped in, said they had financial struggles and I wouldn't understand. That's when I pulled out the bank printouts, laid them on the table, pointed at each transfer, each date, each lie. Kira crumbled. She admitted she'd been funneling money to her parents, who'd lost a bunch in some shady crypto scheme. She didn't tell me because she knew I wouldn't approve. She actually said, "I knew you'd be too critical. Too critical. They stole from me, lied, locked me out in the cold. And I'm the problem?" I didn't lose my temper. I didn't shout. Instead, I pulled out another piece of paper. 3 things. Return every dollar within 48 hours. Her entire family moves out within a week. If she wants any chance of salvaging this marriage, we start couples therapy immediately. Her mum laughed. That's when I pulled out my phone and played the last 60 seconds of the video I recorded that night in the snow. Lucas's voice came through loud and clear. "Freeze to death, worthless idiot." Then Kira's laugh. Her dad raising a wine glass. I told them if they didn't comply, the video would be shared with every friend, colleague, and family member. I even mentioned I'd spoken to a lawyer. I hadn't. Yet, it got quiet. Real quiet. I left without another word. The next morning, $7,800 back in my account. Text from Kira, "They'll be out by Friday. Can we talk?" I didn't reply. I wasn't done thinking. Friday came faster than I expected. I stood in front of the house I used to call home, not sure what I'd find inside. Mason came with me, just in case. They were gone. Early, surprisingly. No damage, but the house felt off. Furniture rearranged. My recliner shoved into the corner like it had offended someone. The thermostat turned down to 63, and every wedding photo was taken down. Family photos, still there, just not the ones with me in them, petty but not unexpected. My PlayStation was still hooked up, but the saved data, deleted. The fridge, empty, not even ketchup left. Then I found a note on the kitchen counter, handwritten. From Kira. It wasn't an apology, it was an invoice. She'd listed her share of household expenses over the last 5 years and claimed we were now even for the $7,800 she took. I took a picture of it and posted it to my Instagram story with the caption, "This is what closure looks like, apparently." The DMs rolled in. I texted her and asked to meet one last time, somewhere neutral, public. She agreed. We met the next day at the park. It was cold, but the snow had started to melt. Fitting, Kira looked smaller. Not physically, just deflated. Like someone let the air out of her. She started crying before I even sat down. I didn't say anything, just let her talk. She said she never meant for it to go that far. That Lucas convinced her it was just a prank. That her parents had good intentions, but were in deep financial trouble and leaned on her more than they should have. She admitted that locking me out was supposed to be a wake-up call, a twisted way of showing that I wasn't making space for her family. I asked one question I'd been holding in for weeks. Was any of it real? Or was I just a safe bet with a paycheck? She hesitated. "I loved you," she said. "But yeah, I picked you because I knew you'd never say no to me. You were steady, predictable." That hit harder than the lockout, because it was honest. I told her I was filing for divorce, that I wasn't angry anymore. Just done. She didn't argue. But that's not where it ends. There's one more piece. See, I'd been talking with her Aunt Rose, the only one in Kira's family who ever treated me like a human being. We hadn't spoken in years because Kira's parents cut her out of their lives for disrespecting family boundaries. Turns out, Rose had a story, the same story, different decade. Her parents took money from her too, manipulated her, gaslit her, made her feel like she owed them for raising her. She'd been shut out when she pushed back. So when she heard what happened to me, she reached out. We started comparing notes. Turns out Kira's parents had a long history of doing this, clinging to their adult kids, using them, draining them, then discarding them when they got pushback. I asked Rose one thing, would you come with me? She did. That Sunday, Kira's family had their usual extended family dinner. Rose and I showed up unannounced. The room went silent. Kira's mum froze with her wine glass halfway to her mouth. Her dad's jaw clenched. Lucas tried to slip out the back. I didn't yell, didn't raise my voice. I just laid it all out. The lockout, the stolen money, the years of slowly being pushed out of my own life. Then I played the video. Right there, in front of cousins, uncles, grandparents, Kira's whole family got to hear Lucas say, "Freeze to death, worthless idiot." Got to hear Kira laugh. Rose followed up with her own story. Her own betrayal, how they cut her out and labelled her the problem when she refused to be their wallet. And then something wild happened. People started talking. One cousin admitted Kira's parents pressured her for money when she got a job out of college. Another uncle said he hadn't been invited to a holiday in 3 years because he refused to co-sign a loan. It all spilled out. Years of silent resentment, buried tension, finally in the open. Lucas tried to talk, but his girlfriend, who'd been quiet the whole time, turned to him and said, "You locked your sister's husband out in a snowstorm." She dumped him on the spot. Kira didn't say a word the entire time. Just sat there, face pale, eyes fixed on the table. Afterward, I left. Quietly. Just like I came in. Rose and I grabbed coffee after. She thanked me. I thanked her. 2 people who'd been made to feel crazy finally realizing we weren't. That was 2 weeks ago. Since then, I filed the papers. Kira didn't contest anything. She moved in with her cousin. I kept the house. Changed the locks my turn this time. Painted the walls. Replaced the couch. Got a dog from the shelter. His name's Milo. He follows me everywhere and has claimed my old recliner as his throne. I started reaching out to friends I'd lost touch with. Turns out, they'd always seen something was off. I just didn't want to hear it. Funny thing is, I don't feel angry anymore. I feel light. A little bruised, a little tired, but free. Kira stopped by once to pick up the last of her stuff. She apologized again. This time it felt real. I believed her, but it didn't change anything. Some bridges don't need rebuilding. Some stories don't get a sequel. It's been a month since that night I stood in the snow, watching people I once called family laugh at me through a window. Now, when I sit in my recliner with Milo curled up next to me, the house is quiet, peaceful. It's not perfect. I still forget to buy groceries sometimes. The sink leaks a little. I still wake up expecting to hear voices in the kitchen, but it's my house again, and I'm not standing outside anymore.